Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hearthstone Report. I am your host JJ, and today we're going to be talking about Forged in the Barrens, the Year of the Gryphon, and the new core set that comes with the Year of the Gryphon. There is a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into it. I'm gonna skim over some of the recent changes to Battlegrounds and Duels, which are in this article that you're currently seeing on screen, but I am gonna talk about the fact that High Absolura was in fact nerfed from 4 mana to 5. To delay the shenanigans of the Cheese Paladin, as they call it, or some people call it Ram Paladin, but either way, the old tip the scales, fish and chips, fish and cheese, I think I've heard it being called as well. You know, the best deck in the game. They nerfed it. So yeah, full dust refund for if you disenchant Allura, as per usual. So that is a good thing to do. They also explain why they're doing it. Yeah, full dust refund until 2 weeks after the patch hit. That was a couple days ago, so, you know, if you have an Allura and you don't want to play it anymore, you know, do it now. Again, Battlegrounds updates, you are free to go to the article yourself and check that out. Same goes for Duels. I don't play either of the game modes enough to really talk about that. Pre-purchases, I don't care about. But what is worth mentioning is that you can get a Shadowhunter Vol'jin by just logging into the game. I think that will be available for a long while. Usually that is for most of the expansion. And if you log in before March 2nd, which is like a little over a week away at this point, you can also go to the shop and claim this 30-year Blizzard anniversary card pack in the shop. Now, very important, you have to go to the shop and actually purchase it for free. It doesn't cost you anything, but you have to actually actively go out of your way to get it, so if you want it, don't miss it. Having said that, various bug fixes, you know, as is usual with the patch notes, but that is not the exciting thing. We want to know about the Year of the Gryphon, and here we are with the Year of the Gryphon. First of all, we got this little thing here where they kind of showcase the 3 different expansion styles. The first one is going to be Forged in the Barrens, we already know that. Second one, possibly Lions themed, since the first one is kind of horde focused. I don't actually know what the third one is, I didn't do much research in that regard. We got a roadmap, you know, some of the usual stuff. It's actually very sparse, because Phase 2 doesn't have anything special, and Phase 3 really only has the one unknown thing. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So they have single player content in all of them, which is going to be the Book of Mercenaries, being kind of the sequel to Book of Heroes. I guess doing Phase 1 is even Book of Heroes to some degree, but Phase 1 has a lot of stuff, including the new Mercenaries mode, which sounds very exciting, and some other stuff, like, I mean, updates to all the modes and such. There is not anything too special, but I think that's a good thing, because if they introduced a new game mode with every single expansion, then quickly we would be in a situation where none of them, except for maybe the most popular 1 or 2, would get updated, so it's fair enough that they're doing this. Already talked about Classic Mode, so that's not something, if you want to know more about Classic Mode, as well as the other stuff that was already available before BlizzCon, I would direct you to, you know, info card up there, if I remember to do it. And yeah, so there's not a lot going on this year, but I think, as I said, that's fine. We get mini-sets every expansion, we get the Book of Mercenaries as a sequel to the Book of Heroes, so there will always be content and cards available. The Mercenaries is presumably the mode that was originally listed to come out in Phase 3 of the Year of the Phoenix, so they got that a little bit delayed, but I'd rather have a delayed game mode than a bad one. Hopefully it will be good. Yeah, so they are making some changes. Well, they are revealing some cards for the core set. I'm going to talk about those at the end of the video. One thing that I think is worth talking about, though, is they're changing the Shaman hero power. This is, to my knowledge, the first time since Hearthstone's full release that a hero power has been changed. They are replacing Wrath of Air Totem, that's the one that gives spell damage +1, with Strength Totem, which at the end of your turn, give another friendly minion +1 attack. It's a 1 mana 0/2, I mean the mana cost doesn't matter unless you're evolving, which of course for Shaman in particular is relevant. Otherwise, yeah, it's Master Swordsmith, I suppose, in a way, but on a totem. I don't know if I like this more or less than Wrath of Air Totem, but they have adjusted some other things in the Shaman class, like we'll see later with Lightning Storm, now reliably dealing 3 damage, so Wrath of Air Totem is arguably a slight bit less necessary, so maybe this is good for more minion-focused gameplay, but I'm not gonna judge it too harshly either direction as good or bad until we actually know for a fact how good or bad it is. It is interesting to note that they do change hero powers, so that could potentially open some other stuff for the future, though this is in a way the most unique hero power in that it has multiple outcomes, so just changing one of them is a very small change, whereas any other class you would have to make a more drastic change to your hero power. The other thing is, classic format, again I talked about that already, but it is worth noting that whenever it launches with the 20.0 patch, which will be the one that introduced Forge in the Barrens, anyone who logs in around that time, they don't list a time limit here, but will get a golden classic pack. You know, make sure to claim that. If you don't intend to play Wild, those cards will be useless for you, so at least you can get some dust out of them. If you do intend to play Wild, you know, they will still be part of the Legacy set in Wild, so you might actually get some cards that you want to play. New game on Hearthstone Mercenaries, which they say very little about. They mention it's going to be a roguelike game mode. There's going to be various heroes that you can play. The official press release states dozens. The 10 mercenary characters from the Book of Mercenaries will be in there, as well as plenty of other characters. How exactly this game mode works is unclear. You get to play 3 heroes, and you get to battle on this track to level them and get some rewards for that game mode. It's supposed to be roguelike, I think I said that already, as well as having a multiplayer component where you can play other players. That's pretty much all we know. There is going to be non-combat encounters as well on this path. Presumably those will be like those sort of ones. I am looking forward to this, but right now we don't know nearly enough to actually make an accurate judgment of how good or bad this game is going to be, but you know. I am hopeful, and that is all I can say about that. Book of Mercenaries I already mentioned, and then there's some updates to the new player experience, which I also don't find worthy of talking about. One more thing that is not in here, but they did mention that they are going to split up the rewards track a bit further, so that from the sounds of it, they will actually just stretch the current 50 levels to 100 levels, with the rewards pretty much evenly being spread around those levels, and the XP between levels being half of what it was. So, practically not a big difference. They say that you'll get slightly more rewards in total. Last time they said that that wasn't the case, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they will probably not try cheating us out of gold when it's even more blatantly obvious than it would have been before. So, you know, it's probably going to be truthful. That being said, let's get into cards. First of all, I'm going to go into the Forged in the Barrens cards. Shadowhunter Vulcan, the login reward, I showed them to you earlier. It's a 5-mana 3/6 spellcry. Choose a minion, swap it with a random one in its owner's hand. That can either be used if you're playing some big minions and maybe getting all of your small minions through spells. Like in a Token Druid, for example, you could have some big hitters in there and then all of your other minions come from spells, as I said. And then you could effectively swap something like a 1-drop out for a huge minion. There is some ideas there, as well as just having the ability to use it as a pseudo-removal tool with your opponent's minions, though that has a chance of backfiring. I guess some comparisons will be cards like Death Knight or something like that, where you give your opponent one of their minions and you just hope it's not that big. Could potentially be very effective against decks that rely on buffing, because the minion, of course, when swapped, will lose all of its buffs. So if your opponent plays a deck that has a lot of small to medium minions and a lot of buffs, like Token Druid, then that could be used as a control tool. I think you probably want to mostly play this in decks that want to use it on themselves and just happen to have the advantage of using it on their opponent, unless the meta is really built in a way where it's useful as a control tool, but we'll see how that plays out. Next card is Blademaster Samuro. 4-mana 1/6 legendary rush minion with Frenzy, which is the new keyword, which means the first time it takes damage and survives, that effect is triggered. Again, like Spellburst, this is triggered once. And it says deal damage equal to this minion's attack to all enemy minions. Not particularly exciting as is. I mean, it could still be used somewhat effectively against decks like Zoo or Token or other very aggressive decks that don't have a lot of health, but I think, of course, the strongest use for this would probably be after you buffed the attack somehow, which a lot of classes can easily do. Blessing of Might comes to mind, though we don't know if it's going to be in the new core set, so that's just a guess. But there is plenty of cards that allow you to buff the attack of your minions that would make this into a very good removal tool. So this could possibly be in some control decks, maybe even in some aggro decks, as as a way to deal with other aggro decks and still retain a strong minion on the board with 6 health. It's very easy for it to survive damage, and you can still hit face afterwards. So there is definitely some, I mean, and of course Frenzy, as I kind of implied but never said, is easy to trigger because of the rush. Also works really well with something like Inner Rage, but again, don't know if that card is going to be in core set. It's kind of weird to have to consider that now not only are 3 sets going to rotate out, but also we're going to get rid of Classic, although a lot of the cards will be retained. But it's going to be interesting to see how the new meta develops, because honestly at this point it's very hard to project. This is another shows up actually 2 new things. We're going to have basically tribes for spells. As a concept, not very exciting. It's cool. It opens up a new design space. I don't hate they're doing it. As a matter of fact, I like it as a concept, but until we get to see more of the synergy cards, it's not really that interesting. I mean, we're going to see later, there is going to be something that interacts with nature spells, but for now, Chain Lightning, rank 1, that's the other new thing. Rank spells, so they have the upgrade whenever you have 5 mana or 10 mana. Well, 5 mana and then 10 mana again. And so this is the upgraded versions. And this one is a 2 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion and a random adjacent one, and it's going to upgrade to deal 3 and 4 damage. So a nice control tool for Shaman. I think this is a solid card. At 2 mana it might be a bit weak, but if you're facing a really aggressive deck, it might still be very much worthwhile. And then, I mean, it still effectively deals up to 4 damage, so it's not bad. And then later on deals even more, so it's going to be a very versatile spell. Like, I could see a lot of these ranked spells seeing some play because they do get stronger in the late game, and they're usually not exactly weak in the early game either. Brucon is what I talked about with the nature spell synergy. So this guy is a 4 mana 5/4 legendary shaman minion. He has nature spell damage +3. That means all of your nature spells specifically deal +3 damage. So it's a way for them to give a minion a higher spell damage than they might normally put on it, without having to give him a huge hit to the stats, but limiting it more towards certain spells so that it's less exploitable. Though I would reckon that a lot of shaman spells that deal damage would be nature spells, but we'll see about that. Peon is a 2 mana 2/3 neutral minion with Frenzy and a random spell from your class to your hand. We've seen a lot of neutral cards that add a spell from your class, so that is a design space that we've seen before. With 3 health, the Frenzy is a bit harder to trigger, but it's some interesting value. I'm sure there's going to be some decks that don't hate this card, but whether it's going to be very popular, we'll see, but it is a common, so not a big deal. Mankrik is a neutral legendary 3 mana 3/4 battlecry help. Yeah, it shuffles Ogra, Mankrik's wife, into your deck. The actual text of what it says is irrelevant. This is a bit like classic Hearthstone, where sometimes you would just have cards that say like Battlecry, give both players the power to rock, and you just have to guess what it does or know what it does. The token spell then says cast when drawn. Does not have a mana cost, interestingly enough, which seems like a possible issue, since there used to be ways to get cast when drawn cards on your hand, which would make this unplayable once that happens. It's not very common that it happens, but usually cast when drawn cards still have a mana cost, so that's something to look out for. Maybe Blizzard will change it in the future. Summon a 3/10 Mankrik who immediately attacks the enemy hero. So, you know, it's a 3/10 token that attacks the hero. There's not much to say about this. I don't think it's that good, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I guess it does summon a thing without an additional mana cost, so it could be good. I guess specifically in decks that thin out very fast, but we'll see if it actually sees a lot of play. Resume Raider is a 5 mana 5/6 with Frenzy, attack a random enemy. So, again, if you have something like Inner Rage and your opponent doesn't have a board, you could potentially use this in a very aggressive manner. While if your opponent has a wide board, it'll kind of automatically have a high chance of becoming a control tool. Which, I guess, that in and of itself is good, because if your opponent is playing control, then you're having a more aggressive role with it. If your opponent is playing aggro, you automatically have a bit more of a controlling manner, so it does kind of adapt to how you play. It has solid stats. Effectively, I would say the Frenzy is generally an upside, though there can be cases where it just kills itself. So it's not significantly stronger than a vanilla 5 mana 5/6, so probably not great, but it's decent, so hey. Sunscreen Raptor is a 1 mana 1/3 Hunter Beast. Frenzy, shuffle a Sunscreen Raptor into your deck with a permanent +2/+1. I think in the video where they showed it, it said +1/+1, so I don't know which of those two is accurate. I'm gonna go with probably the one on the website. But either way, it basically keeps growing as you shuffle it. I mean, 1-3 traditionally is not a bad stat line. Beast is a good drive to have, especially as a hunter. So I'm gonna say this is a good card for aggressive hunter decks. Possibly for not so aggressive ones as well, because it will be good in the late game as well. I'm gonna give this one, I said this as if I gave sour rings. I'm gonna say it's a good one. Druid of the Plains. Now, with the Druid off, it's surprising that it doesn't have a choose one effect, but as you'll see, it still makes sense. It's a 7-7/6 Rush Beast for Druid, with Frenzy transform into a 6/7 Kodo with Taunt. So this one doesn't switch its forms on the summon, but rather on the Frenzy trigger, which is very interesting because a 7-7/6 Rush minion isn't horrible. Beast is a tribe that Druid can interact with in a somewhat limited manner, but we will see that there's going to be at least one card in the core set that has synergy with this. And then getting a 6/7 Kodo with Taunt, you know, it's full health. It will be a fine 6-drop. So getting effectively something that is a solid 6-drop Rush minion that transforms into a solid 6-drop Taunt minion is very good. I mean, this is kind of like some of these Taunt or Rush minions that have a Death Rattle that summons something else, like Augmented Rattler, for example. So in that vein, I think this is a very solid minion, and of course, as an epic, that makes sense that it would be. Imp Swarm, rank 1, again, a ranked spell. 2-mana summon a 3/2 Imp, 2-mana 3/2 is vanilla. It's not great, but if you don't have anything better to play, it's solid. And then, of course, it's just a demon. And then the upgraded ones summon 2 and 3, and at that point, it's very good. So maybe for a Zoo Warlock type deck, where in the late game you still have some power, while in the early game it's a bit underwhelming, but it's still solid, so I think this could see some play. Spirit Healer is a 4-mana 3/6 after you cast a Holy spell, once again interacting with the spell tribes. Give a random friendly minion +2 health. I don't see it unless we get Inner Fire, but specifically in Priest, which of course has a lot of Holy spells. I think Paladin might have Holy spells as well and could possibly see some play. If we're seeing some, well, you can take more trades, or at least make your minions more resilient with extra health, but in and of itself, a 4-mana 3/6 isn't great, and just a little bit of health buffs doesn't strike me as awesome. Might see some play, I don't know. And last card that we know for now from Forge in the Barrens. Desperate Prayer, 0-mana, restore 5 health to each hero. It's a holy spell, so that could trigger some synergies, and since we've seen that a 1-mana minion that has proper sets for a 1-mana minion that says give 4 armor to both heroes sees some play, I could see this see some play, specifically in control decks. We'll just have to wait and see. I've said this a lot today, but that's just what it is. The cards, this is Hearthstone, by the way. I'm going to put a link to all of my sources, of course, in the description. These are the cards that we know for a fact are going to be in the core set. There is some other cards that we could reasonably infer from some of the B-roll footage that was released by Blizzard, that was also shown in some of their BlizzCon panels, where they kind of show that there was, in the Rogue B-roll, there was Deadly Poison and Sinister Strike were on the hand that I remember, and one of the Shamans had Tidal Surge, which all had the Year of the Gryphon swirl, like you'll see on some of these. This sort of, I think there it is. Some of these have the classic one as well. I guess they're going to use the Year of the Gryphon one, but we'll see. So we can infer that those might be in there, but the ones we know for a fact are these. Now, they were in the previous Play Hearthstone article as well, at least some of them, but this is a full list, so I want to use this as a source. Starting off with Vanessa Vancleave, which is a 2-mana 2/3 legendary rogue minion with combo, add a copy of the last card your opponent played to your hand. If there's like a Burgle Rogue archetype, this could be interesting, otherwise, It doesn't even guarantee that it's from your opponent's class. And so, if there is Burgle synergies, that might be good, but otherwise, it's a 2-mana 2/3 with a minimal upside. I don't like it that much. Overlord Rumthak is a rush minion, is a 5-mana 3/6 rush minion. Whenever this attacks, give +1/+1 to all minions in your hand. If you have a very minion heavy deck, this could be solid. 5 mana is a bit much to have a big hand, so that's something to consider, but they said that they wanted this in there to possibly enable further hand buffing archetypes, and if there is a solid hand buff archetype, this could definitely go in there. It has a guarantee to at least attack once, so not the worst thing in the world.
Hello,
Ysera the Dreamer
acts
acts as an upgraded version of Ysera, now as a battle card adds one of each dream card to your hand, otherwise same stat limit to 4, so instead of getting one and then likely getting killed, you get
and the new core set
one
that
copy of
comes
each.
with the Year
Some
of
are
the Gryphon.
more useful than others, but the dream cards generally are very good, so
right into it.
I could see this being a solid card in control decks.
To Battlegrounds and Duels.
Malagos Spellweaver, battle card draw spells until your hand is full.
On screen, but I am going to talk about
actually kind of similar to Ysera, slightly less value because it's cards from your deck,
4 mana
but
to 5.
also in a way could be better cards,
delay the shenanigans of
the dream cards are
Paladin, as
technically overpowered in as much as they would be overpowered if they weren't constructed.
Either way, the old tip the scales.
I mean, I think this is solid.
Fish and cheese, I think I've heard
noteworthy, of course, that the classic versions of these cards can still be played in the Legacy set and Wild, so you can still play the Malagos, and it has been said that these do, from the way it was worded, apparently not count towards the 29 new cards, which is cool. At least that's how it sounded whenever that was mentioned in the press release.
If you have and you don't
Malagos is one I have the hardest time making up my mind on, because it's not strictly better or worse than the old one, it's just different. Deathwing is probably also better than the old one. Battle Cry Destroy all other minions, discard a card for each destroyed, so basically if there's a huge reward, likely just as with the old Deathwing, but there is a chance that you rotate some cards, so it's just arguably strictly better, unless you go for discard synergy, in which case maybe not, but
and if you log in before
Cure
March
Fordring
2nd,
is unchanged. He saw some degree of play, so I'm not gonna knock him too much for including him. Fellsword Jailer is a new 5-mana 4/6 demon for Warlock. Battlecry, your opponent discards a card, Death will return it.
In the shop,
so Warlock Disruption
very important.
has been a thing that we've seen before. It's slightly understated. It is a demon. It has an upside.
It doesn't cost you anything,
but a very limited one. I don't know. Maybe in a control deck, we'll miss it. Earth Elemental is now a 5-mana 7/8 elemental with Taunt and Overload 2. They produce a lot of cards, and
want to know about
I think this is perfectly playable.
And here we are.
If it's going to be an elemental or an Overload archetype, I could see this, or maybe just in a control deck where you don't mind throwing away your turn 6, like somewhat throwing away turn 6 for just having a huge taunt to delay your opponent. I'm going to start scrolling a bit here. Yeah, this is it. Feral Spirit
don't actually know the thoroughbreds. I didn't do much research.
Not hugely changed as well. It now has Overload 1 instead of 2. Making it a lot more playable, arguably, if there was maybe a token Shaman, or again, just for control decks. Lightning Storm now always deals 3 damage, otherwise unchanged.
I don't think that's necessarily
I think this goes a bit hand in hand with the Wrath of Air not being what it used to be, so before it would on average deal 2.5 damage. And you would oftentimes roll Wrath of Air Totem, or try to roll a Wrath of Air Totem before you do it, giving you a 1 in 4 or slightly higher for only the other totem's chance of making it deal more damage, so
and some other
it's almost like
updates to all of them.
They just took the randomness out of it, made it more reliable.
Anything too special, but I think that's a good thing, because
on average it's not going to be much better or worse. Another Zapper is a 1-mana 3/2. It's a new card, spell damage +1, Overload 1.
None of them.
This one seems really solid. In an aggro deck, you might not necessarily mind as much with the Overload.
It's fair enough that they're doing this.
And having spell damage could be helpful in something like Lightning Bolt if that were to be a card in standard.
More about classic mode as well as.
So I could see maybe we get played in aggro, but
was already available.
It remains to be seen. Flaming sees some play, but arguably the downside is less bad for an aggro deck.
If I remember,
Assassinate is back, but now it costs 4 mana, so it's all just better than Hex.
There's a lot going on this year, but
Polymorph.
As I said, that's
in
fine.
most cases.
We get mini sets every expansion.
That's nice.
The Book of Mercenaries.
Otherwise, it's 4 mana Assassinate. What can I say?
So there will always be cards.
Menagerie Warden now 5 mana 4/4, but still has Battlecry, Choose a Friendly Beast, summon a copy of it. As I said, we now have beasts for sure. I think we always had some amount of beasts into it.
The Phoenix, so they got that.
This is potentially a very good card,
game more than a bad one,
but you have to actually have a good beast to use it with.
Yeah,
I mean, Teacher's Pet might make sense, right? There's definitely beasts in standard right now. There will be a new standard that could be used with this. The question is how many beasts you have to have in your deck for it to be worthwhile.
To my knowledge,
we'll see.
First time
Fireball's back. Not a lot to say about Neutron's back. Depends on how much max energy we have, but generally a somewhat solid early game card. And 2 Pillagers back.
+1 with Strength.
I mean,
which
rogues like cheap cards. It gives you a 0 mana coin.
It's
probably very good.
I mean, the mana cost doesn't matter unless you're evolving.
In some archetypes.
Shaman in particular is relevant.
Let me know what you think about these cards. Join our Discord server, link in the description below. Give a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.
But
and that's it.